Il faut dire merci beaucoup encore une fois et félicitations à professeur Petit et ses collègues à Liège et puis ici. It's a true pleasure to be here, to be learning so much from so many other people with such great ideas. And so I thank you and congratulate you on your new center and your new project, and I am already learning so much. It is a special pleasure for me as an academic and as a member of the European Academy of Arts and Sciences to be back in Europe with other academics. But you're right, I am now also on leave from academia, and I work in the government, and of course that means that I must disclaim that my views that I present today do not reflect necessarily those of the other commissioners at the ITC, or President Obama for nominating me, or the United States Senate, which, although voting unanimously to give its consent, is not responsible. So these are ideas. But I think it's worth taking just a moment to discuss this, I think, admittedly very strange part of the United States government, because we have inside the ITC, I will talk in just a moment about my colleagues and I, but let me talk first about our team, our staff of 400 professionals. We have in the bottom left-hand corner an entire law firm inside the ITC called OUII, which is separated from control by even we, the commissioners. They are an independent body that represents the public interest. So there was a mention of representing the citizens of Europe. The OUII lawyers represent the public in the United States, the public in the world, the public. We have as well a group of investigative professional industry experts, business experts, and technology experts in OIMV who are experts in analyzing and conducting surveys from the world markets and the world governments and the world businesses. And so there's often discussion, for example, of the Federal Trade Commission's so-called 6B study of patent assertion entities. They are doing a survey. They're using their subpoena power. They are forcing people to answer the questions. That's what a subpoena is. We conduct surveys. Our OINV conducts surveys. We've been around for a long time. This year, 2016, is the 100th anniversary of the ITC, but it actually dates back to a predecessor, the Tariff Commission from the mid-1800s. We almost never use our subpoena power. OINV has an incredible response rate over 100 years for its surveys, and it's because people want to give the information because they trust the independence of OINV and the independence of the ITC. That's why we don't use our subpoena power, although we have it. We just don't use it. And that means that our response rates are very high because they're trusted. They're trusted inside the US and outside the US. That means we make mistakes. We are human. We do all sorts of things wrong. But the one thing people don't do is presume that we are in their pocket or someone else's pocket. We're independent. We're independent in our mistakes. So we also have a group of economists that do, we have the dynamic equilibrium model, a computer-generated economy that models flows inside and outside of the US economy. And of course there are other offices, but there's a lot of talent inside the building, and it is that talent that helps us, the commissioners. So there are 6 of us. This is what makes us especially strange inside the United States government. So the United States fought a very violent war with itself, the Civil War in the mid-1800s. And it was unfortunately not only fought over slavery, that I think we all wish would have been enough to go to war over. It was also fought over tariffs. The United States, as a government at that time, financed its operations by taxing imports. We didn't have an income tax at the time. And so this was an extremely political thing. And it was that political tension that was a big contributing factor to an entire war that cost us many, many millions of lives. So it was a big thing. So the chairman of the economics department at Harvard University at the time was a professor named Taussig, and he wrote about a structure for depoliticizing the border and depoliticizing tariffs. And it was to create what a good Belge or other Northern European might think of as the essence of a Northern Renaissance painting, a Bosch or a Bruegel, right? I will chew on your ankle while you chew on my neck. And so we have created Taussig's structure, Taussig's insight was to create a commission that has an even number of commissioners, that is designed for deadlock, so that there are two economic equilibria game theory outcomes and nothing in between, heaven and hell. We are either absolutely terribly in conflict, or we are boring and analytical and collaborative. And fortunately, the bulk of our existence has been the positive equilibrium, not the negative equilibrium. But that's because we have 6 commissioners, an even number, no more than 3 from one of the major political parties in the US. We have a chair that is required to switch among the 6 every 2 years. So if when I am chair, I say that you get black paper and black ink so that you can't even read your own notes, and I get beautiful yellow paper with elegant handwritten notes, then when you're chair, my office will be outside in the cold, right? We understand conflict and tension, and we understand how if you create this structure, the game theory incentive is for cooperation. So even on very, very, very minor administrative matters like ordering of the paper and the color of the stationery, any 4 commissioners can overrule the chair, and the chair rotates among the 6 commissioners. And that creates a radically different outcome than you get in the rest of the government. And so when you think about the United States government and the many very good parts of the US government that touch on the patent system, and these are all good parts of the government. These are all parts of the government full of extremely talented, hardworking, honest, publicly spirited human beings who are committed to the public interest. But they have a very different game theory. They have a very different incentive structure. And so on the far left side, whether it is a Democratic president or a Republican president, it is the same. You have the executive branch of the US government. And the executive branch of the US government is by design supposed to be, this is a feature, not a flaw, it is supposed to be and is very responsive to political input from industry and from citizens. It is a political part of the government. As you move to the far side of the slide to the judiciary, you have another part of the government designed not to be politically responsive. These are all good. They're all good civil servants. They're all trying their best to do the same public interest, but they have very different tools at their disposal. And they have very different, by design, responsiveness to input. There's something else happening in the slide as you move from left to right. On the far left, whether it's the Antitrust Division at the Department of Justice or the Patent Office inside the Department of Commerce, you have before you, as a decision maker, as a government official, a very limited number of topics. The United States Patent Office, like the EPO generally, does not decide infringement, it decides validity. And as everybody who plays in the patent game knows, in a patent infringement context, both teams of lawyers, you the lawyers and you the corporate interests, have a radically different incentive facing you when you are arguing to a government official over validity only, than when you are arguing at the same time over validity and infringement. If you are the patentee and you are arguing over validity only, you have an incentive to say to the patent office, my dear patent office, you must issue my patent, you must reaffirm its validity. It is so extremely narrow, it is not possible that it captures prior art. But if you are arguing validity and infringement, on the infringement side, you want to say, my dear judge, look at these possible set of defendants in the world. Every single one of them is an infringer. They all owe me money. My claim covers the world. Oops, but I can't say that if I am also arguing validity. And therefore, I have a selfish reason to discipline the very arguments that I make as an advocate, as a party, if I know that I am arguing before a decision maker who is deciding at the same time broad anti-competitive concepts like antitrust and infringement and remedy and validity. When you have all of these concepts before the same decision maker at the same time, the party who is arguing to the government official has her own selfish discipline. And as a result, unfortunately, my colleagues in the Department of Justice Antitrust Division and in the Patent Office suffer from having advocates argue before them hyperbolic arguments, arguments that are not disciplined by the arguer's own incentive to engage in self-discipline, because these are bodies that do not decide simultaneously validity, infringement, remedy, and anti-competitive effect. So the self-disciplining effect on the parties is on the far left of the slide, not present, and on the far right of the slide, present. So two things are happening. A lot of, by design, a feature not a flaw, political influence, political responsiveness, agility, and on the far right, independence and deliberative process. On the far left, self-discipline and modesty in the arguments presented before the government officials, and on the far right, I'm sorry, the opposite, on the far left, no incentive for self-discipline and modesty, and on the far right, self-discipline and modesty, right? So the three-letter commissions inside the United States government that are designed as independent commissions, like the Federal Trade Commission that you mentioned, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the Federal Communications Commission, many of these seemingly independent commissions, I have included more on the left because they do not have 6 members, they have 5. They do not have a chair who rotates every 2 years. They have a chair who can sit for the entire time that the president is in office. And perhaps even more importantly, if the president doesn't like what they're doing, the president can simply replace them, period. Our chair cannot be replaced, and our chair must rotate. Many of them can be reappointed. We cannot be reappointed. We don't even have an incentive to please a political master because we can get no refund. So it is a radically different incentive structure. And so I put the ITC over with the far right because unlike the FTC, this opportunity for the political incentive structure is radically different. And unlike the FTC, but like the federal courts, we decide at the same time validity, infringement, remedy, and anti-competitive effect, which means like the courts, we have the benefit of very, very smart lawyers who have selfish reasons to self-discipline to give more modest arguments. And that means we have the ability to write detailed, reasoned opinions supported by an explicit record. That yields a radically different outcome. So I think that this slide alone provides an immense amount of information that we can talk more about in the Q&A. And let me just skip forward because I think we're all pretty familiar with the hope that, that the recognition at the very bottom that tracing and evaluating the contributions of every single player in the game is always going to be hard to do, and that we have to be extremely humble about our ability to get that right. And we're, of course, also familiar with Williamson and the set of hold-up games. So let me just end with this slide, which talks about the Apple-Samsung case, and before that, the Broadcom-Qualcomm case, and just point out that even the dissenting voice in Apple-Samsung at the ITC, if you look in the very next major standard essential patent public case that we have written, the 501, the Amcor-Carsem case, you see 4 different commissioners of the 6 writing very detailed, diverse perspectives about both the substantive problem of what kind of market failures can be applied or available for analysis, but also the procedural questions like have been hinted to in the prior panels. What is the precise behavior by the different parties on both sides? So, more specifically, how much evidence do we have of specific behavior, and of what behavior, and what economic inference are we supposed to make about that behavior? One of the features of the ITC is that we are so independent, collaborative, and boring, but that's okay. We can cure any insomnia out there. We have, of course, also, therefore, a range of procedures to facilitate collaborative discussion. And so the second 2 bullets are to simply point out, and there are citations to the details here, and all of this is available on the web, but we have procedures for facilitating explicit dialogue among the commissioners as well as between the commissioners and the parties. And that then means you can understand explicitly what we are doing, and you can show us and everybody else when we are wrong and how we're wrong. And so I invite lots of dialogue back home at the ITC as well as back here in Europe, and look forward to more discussion. Thank you.